Greetings. This is Nyah Tsai with National Network View. I will speak with NNV Weekly contributor Charles Mohammed, who will provide tips on how to eat to live, the foods we should store in our houses, and the foods we should avoid. Before we get into the top news, let's do a recap of the current events we've recently covered. NNV News anchor Rosalind Parks sat down with weekly contributor Brian E. Mohammed to discuss the overnight assassination of Haitian President Moise and the Haitian uprising that began after the government failed to hold new elections.
We learned today that the Haitian president, Jovenel Moise, was assassinated overnight. Has anyone or any group claimed responsibility for his assassination?
No, no one has claimed responsibility. In fact, the reports that has been going on all day about it, um, particularly from the interim Prime Minister Claude Joseph, who said that they don't know who did it, and there was some footage apparently that was captured where they heard English-speaking people and Spanish-speaking people, which implies that these were, outside mercenaries or outside foreign interests that did this act in the wee hours of the morning.
Brian E. Mohammed provided an update on the situations in Afghanistan and the conflicts in other parts of the world mentioned in the latest Final Call News article. Intentional, intentional blindness or mongering keeping feeding U.S. downfall.
With all of these situations going on, which do you feel is the most imminently dangerous situation?
Yeah. You know, the great reggae singer Bob Marley sang a song, So Much Trouble in the World.
Hmm.
And, I think that they all lend to the end of this world as we know it. I think certain hotspots are more dangerous than others. I think what's happening, this back and forth tug of war between the U.S. and Iran is a problem because it has the potential to draw the nations of the earth into war, which leads to a war that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan have constantly warned about from the scriptures called the War of Armageddon.
Brian E. Mohammed also discussed the Israeli welfare state as the U.S. continues to provide Israel with military aid even after the recent Israeli airstrikes that killed nearly 300 Palestinians and destroyed infrastructure in Gaza and the Palestinian occupied territories.
After excessive Israeli airstrikes in May killed nearly 300 Palestinians in the recent bombardment, will the U.S. finally restrict its military funding to Israel?
That would be good news, but no, they won't. And in fact, the after this last skirmish in May, where over 300 or nearly rather 300 people, Palestinian men, women, and children died, and much property damage was done to Palestinian areas like Gaza and the West Bank. The United States turned around and offered or approved a arms sale to the tune of 200 and I had it in front of me. It was 200 and something $1 million. Now they already get $4 billion a year, as we know of our taxpayer money. They are the biggest welfare recipients in the whole world.
NNV News anchor Rosalind Parks spoke with weekly contributor Dr. Akili Mohammed on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic as it swept across the U.S. and the world, adding to famine, food insecurity, and the number of people unemployed.
There was talk of famine at the beginning of this pandemic. Do you have any information about the food security in the world and in the U.S.?
Well, yes, I think that's a very strong point about the fact that famine was discussed in the beginning of this pandemic, but it's relatively been hardly any news about it since then. And I would say that with my research, most of what is being mentioned about famine is pertaining to countries that we typically associate with famine, and that is the countries, of course, in Africa that are having difficulty and have been having difficulties. And they're talking about that famine in those areas worsening. And some estimates are in excess of 200 million people will be affected in those areas.
Sister Sherry Mohammed, founder and director of Asiatic Minds Online School, shared with Rosalind Parks how they are bringing together educators from across the nation to offer a full educational curriculum to our students in order to help them develop skills, talents, and abilities for themselves and our people.
What inspired you to launch Asiatic Minds Online Education at this specific time?
Well, Asiatic Minds, it came about out of necessity. For many years, I'm a homeschooling mom, and I've homeschooled my 5 children for over 20 years. And throughout that time, I always wished that they were able to attend the MUI or have something that they could attend that would reflect our household. And so within that time period, I was introduced to an online school that was based out of Atlanta that my daughter, my oldest daughter, was able to attend. But it never occurred to me at that particular time to develop a school based on my beliefs and principles.
NNV News anchor Willie Muhammad's guest commentators, Dr. Asad El-Malik and Gavin Richards commented on the temporary suspension of U.S. track and field star Sha'Carri Richardson after she tested positive for THC, the active ingredient in marijuana.
Is this the case? Is it an attempt to stop Black dominance in the Olympics, or is this just an example of a bad decision, which has caused somebody to miss out on an opportunity that they've worked hard for?
You know, there's a scene from the movie Friday where Ice Cube's character Craig is upset with Smokey because they had just gotten into it with Big Worm, and he said, "Man, and Smokey tells Craig, I didn't put that joint in your mouth and make you smoke, right?" So, is this a way of keeping Black dominance out of the Olympics? I wouldn't go that far at all to say that. What I think it is a 21-year-old young adult made a mistake who was attempting to cope with the death of her biological mother, and she should have had better people around her who would have given her the type of support, community support that she needed in order to cope with such a tragedy in her life.
Willie Muhammad questioned Dr. Asad El-Malik and Gavin Richards about their thoughts on Bill Cosby's release from prison after his guilty verdict was overturned.
What are your thoughts about Bill Cosby's sexual assault conviction being overturned?
It shouldn't have happened in the beginning. I've been on your show platform many times. I've also talked about it on my platform. There was an agreement by the prosecutor, the original prosecutor, Bruce Castor, and that agreement was in writing. I believe he had sent emails and he communicated with Mr. Cosby's attorney at that time, who is deceased, that there would be no charges filed against Dr. Cosby. As a result of that, and Bruce Castor did not believe that the case, if it went to trial, that he was going to have a chance of winning, because he felt Andrea Constant, from the research that he had done and the lack of evidence thereof, there was not enough to go on. There was no probable cause, which is what a prosecutor is supposed to do. They administer justice, and they have to base it off of probable cause, not off political ambitions.
On I Have a Testimony, NNV News anchor Willie Muhammad's guest, Sister Medina Muhammad, shared her family experiences in the earlier years of the NOI, her mother's work as secretary to Master Farad Muhammad, and the influences of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Sister was just about to share just how it feels just to know that her mother and her father actually work with the Savior who's responsible for the Nation of Islam. Go ahead, Sister Medina.
Okay, yes, sir. It wows me. Sometimes you never know the blessing you have in front of you until it's gone. I've learned more about my mother since she's been gone. She passed in February of 2002. And since we have been blessed to do the exhibits since 2007 with my brothers and a couple of my sisters, and we've been blessed from 2007 all the way up to 2020 to do the exhibits. And the doors that it has opened up for us is tremendous. With Dr. Stacy Muhammad in that exhibit. Oh my God.
Guest contributors Zakiya Sankara Jabbar and Brother Lawrence Muhammad sat down with Willie Muhammad to set the record straight about the criticism of actor Michael B. Jordan for referencing a Caribbean Emancipation Festival in the initial name of his forthcoming rum product.
Which one of you all will be able to give us a brief explanation of what cultural appropriation is?
Sure, I'll go for it.
Yes.
And, so basically, cultural appropriation is basically taking the culture of another people, their mores, the things that they do within their culture, and using it for self. And some definitions say without the approval of that particular culture. Some definitions also say those who are in power taken from those who are not in power, those who are quote unquote beneath them. And so taking their particular cultures, using it for their own culture and as their own culture, basically stealing from someone else. So it's different variations of that definition, but basically it's the same, taking from one culture and bringing to another and claiming it, for themselves.
Zakiya Sankara Jabbar and Brother Lawrence Muhammad discussed the topic of West Point and white rage as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff defended the right of West Point students to discuss race.
What do you think is at the root of the white rage that has always been present in America, but is becoming more and more present during this time that is supposed to be this post-racial society?
Minister Farrakhan has talked about this, but I want to name Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who has created the best definition of racism and white rage that I know of. And I think one of the things that's clear about what's happening is that certain white people understand that they are increasingly becoming a numerical minority in this country. And so there is a lot of fear really at the base of that. And so CRT, which, if we're going to be honest, is not being taught in K-12 schools, but it's a linchpin and a distraction, if you will, for the things that they really do want to enact.
Zakiya Sankara Jabbar and Brother Lawrence Muhammad also shared their thoughts on India Walton's recent Democratic primary win over the four-term mayor of Buffalo, New York, putting her on track to become the first woman to lead New York's second largest city.
What do you think about this historic victory of Sister India Walton?
Yeah, congratulations. Congratulations to the sister. I want to start a very positive. I understand politics, especially from the municipal level, because I have never run for office, but I've worked on campaigns, and I've been a part of understanding how the sausage is made, as a term that a lot of people use. And I will say that I think that it's good that she does have a worker and a working class focus. That's important. What I'm concerned about always, though, especially with politics now with Black leaders, is who is the hand behind the hand, right? Like who's actually controlling the system.
Let us pause for announcements from our sponsors. After the break, Charles Muhammad will be on to give tips from How to Eat to Live on what foods we should store and what foods we should avoid. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps us to highlight solutions for a brighter tomorrow. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Asiatic Minds, online education, helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness, as well as the greatness of our people, and upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Call now, 502-219-4848.
This is Sister Sajida Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajida House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajidahouse.com.
The hashtag Bank Black social media campaign made strides not only in revolutionizing how we bank, but also how we think. The movement inspired thousands of African Americans across the country to transfer or deposit millions of dollars into Black-owned banks. These are banks that will invest in urban communities, employ African Americans, support Black businesses, and inspire Black home ownership. This is a very proud moment for our culture as we are taking small, but significant, steps towards building Black power through Black wealth.
Thank you for tuning in to NNV News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, National Network View. This is Clifton Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in his book, How to Eat to Live, advised us on the foods we should store in our houses and the foods we should avoid. Joining us to discuss this is weekly contributor Charles Muhammad. Peace, Brother Charles. How are you doing today?
Peace, my sister. I'm doing fine. And yourself?
I'm doing wonderful, and that's wonderful to hear as well. My first question is, what does the Honorable Elijah Muhammad say about fat and obesity?
Well, he doesn't say a lot, but he says some things that are very interesting, particularly the foods that cause obesity and excessive weight to begin. In book number 2, on page 65, he says, cornbread, half-done flour bread, and sweet potatoes all shortens your life. The sweet potato is not good for any human to take as a food. White potatoes do very well, but they produce too much starch, which would add fat, and too much fat shortens the life. So here are vegetables that are primarily in the standard American diet, because the standard American diet is a starchy diet. And the excess amount of eating these starches, he says, and he's 100% correct, the excess sugar, which is starch, is converted into fat in the body. And then he continues on page 66. He says, this, I want you fat readers to remember, that your rosy fat does not mean long life. It means short life to you. So in that rosy way of saying it, that those of us who think that we can maintain a long life being overweight, excessively overweight, obese, no, our lives will be cut short. And the medical scientists do bear witness to the Elijah Muhammad that there is a limit to your lifespan when you are overweight and obese.
Oh, yes, sir. And what does the Honorable Elijah Muhammad say is the first thing we should do if we are overweight?
Well, the number one thing he says in both books is eat one meal a day. And so on book 1, page 63, he says, when you begin eating once a day, certainly you will begin to lose weight until you are until you are used to eating once a day. Then you will start gaining weight again. All right. Once you get used to eating one meal a day, and your body adjusts, you'll gain weight again. But then he says, but fat is not wanted for health. It is the enemy to health. So those of us who think we will slowly waste away by eating once a day, that's not true. Your body will make an adjustment with its metabolism, and then you'll start to gain weight again. So then we got to choose the right foods and avoid the foods that we just discussed, which are the potatoes, sweet potatoes, and other starchy products. And learn that starch, which emanates from carbohydrates, right? Carbohydrates are easily converted into fat, especially if you're eating a lot of simple sugars that are processed. And in this slide, it says that normally, if your certain enzymes are in your metabolism are switched on, you will store the fat. If they're switched off, you will burn the fat. So your metabolism really is the indicator of when you eat a lot of starchy foods, whether you burn it or store it. So that's one thing we must learn. Eat one meal a day and then learn our rate of metabolizing certain foods. And real quick, that metabolism means changing matter or changing chemicals. Meta means change and bol means chemical.
Yes, sir. And why are Americans struggling with obesity then?
Well, because we fail to do proper research. You know, libraries are free. You know, there are books abundance. Now you have the internet. We have access to information. Well, we can just watch videos if we don't feel like reading, audio books. But we got to learn what is a calorie. See, a calorie we told are in foods, but calorie is a measurement of heat. You know, calor from the Latin meaning hot, and calorie. It's a measurement of heat. Now, there are calories in ice cream, but that doesn't mean ice cream is flaming hot. It only means that that's the amount of energy that you have to bring in terms of heat in the internal body to break apart the molecules that is in ice cream that makes up its constitution. But once you learn that, you learn how many calories you bring in. You got to learn the output to burn up those calories, right? Bring that fire. So he says on page 10 of book 2, to live a long time, eat once every 24 hours. That's consistent, or once every 48 hours, if you're able to do so. But if you have heavy manual work to do, do not try to eat once every 2 or 3 days. So this is an equation. If you do heavy work, you cannot lessen your calorie intake. You'll begin to consume yourself. But on the flip side of that, if you're an office worker and you sit down a lot, as we said before, you're sedentary, you cannot bring in too many calories because you don't have the activity to burn it off. Because he says on page 7 of the same book, office workers should not eat even baked beans, no beans with rice and meat in them, because their jobs do not permit them enough activity to digest heavy foods. Now, this is not relegated only to those foods. There are many foods that when we're in the office, right? We like to get takeout, the Chinese takeout. Now we got Uber Eats, they'll deliver anything. And so some of those foods are just too heavy for you to burn just sitting down doing office work or even housework. So you have to know your caloric intake and what it takes to balance that your activity.
Yes, sir, Brother Charles. That absolutely 100% makes a lot of sense. Now, is there a fine line between being considered overweight in terms of height and proportion?
Yes. Some of us can carry more weight. Some of us are just big by nature, right? You have Shaquille O'Neal. You know, those people who are just what they call pituitary giants, where their pituitary gland allows them to grow larger height-wise, okay, not horizontally. But then you have those of us that, even though we are larger, like if you remember Michael Clark Duncan or other entertainers like Heavy D, who were husky brothers, who that their bodies broke down over time, and it's just the fact that that weight doesn't match with your organs. Your organs are the same size no matter how big you are. So then we have to take that into consideration. Just because you carry, well, it looked good, and Heavy D was a great dancer, but that will have effects on your internal organs. So there's an index called the body mass index, and there is a calculation that we must adhere to know that whether we're weighing other than self, if you're familiar with that language. So the calculation is your weight over your height squared. Now, I have to take myself as an example, because if I ask other people how much they weigh, they'll lie. And I could guesstimate your height because I deal in architecture, so I deal with measurements every day. But your weight, people tend to lie. But I'm 173 pounds. That's 78.7 kilograms, and I'm 6 feet tall. That's 1.82 meters. So if you do the calculation, my body mass index is 23.7. So I'm, yay, I'm in that range of being normal height to weight body mass index. But as you have more weight and your height becomes a constant basically for the rest of your life, unless you begin to shrink as you get older, your body mass index tends to get out of whack. So that is the fine line. Your height is the indicator of how much you should weigh.
And what are some of the harmful effects of excess body fat?
Well, the effects are visual, right? If you tend to be bigger, I don't want to be rude, because it is a huge problem in this country, and I don't want anyone to feel shamed or offended. But on the inside, you're beautiful on the outside, but on the inside, your internal organs do take a pounding because they're covered in visceral fat. And your joints, from your back to your ankles to all types of other ailments with your joints, that is one of the most common things with being obese. And to the point, I don't want to make it a joking matter, you are considered handicapped to a sense, because there's certain activities that if you didn't carry all that weight, and that weight is not born with you, it's not a birthright, so you can't shed it. That weight does limit you from doing certain things. And Ali Muhammad said that it limits you from a long life. And we know that because with autopsies, they take a look at the internal organs when they, I guess, give you an autopsy and they cut your chest cavity open. You'll see a lot of us have fat around our vital organs, particularly the heart. And the heart in itself is an axiom that it is the core of your life. And if you burn it down with fat, then your life is going to be cut short. So those are the effects of obesity.
Wow, yes, sir. Thank you. Now, losing weight is an uphill battle. So, what final tips could you offer someone that's struggling with that?
Well, I was a fan of the rapper Big Pun, and he is a handsome man. I'm not going to say he was, but at one time he was within his body mass index. But certain events in his life happened to whereas he began to eat excessively. This is, from testimony of his friends like Cuban Links and Fat Joe, that he began to put on a lot of weight. It didn't take away from his talent, but it cut his life short. And when you read the his autopsy, because I read it, there was an article in the New York Post. This was like 20 years ago. It said that his heart was 3 times his normal size. And your heart is about the size of your fist. So imagine having 3 fists in your chest cavity trying to pump your blood through the rest of your body. So he was always in that eternal struggle, to continue to lose weight. And he said in one of his last songs that was released, he said, I just lost 100 pounds. I'm trying to live. So what we need to do, and I'm going to close on this, is that eating excessively is habitual. And there are things that trigger our people and, to eat excessively and eat the wrong foods. They're called comfort foods. So the Honorable Mrs. Farrakhan gave us Dianetics. All right, he gave it to us. We didn't run to the Scientology or Church of Scientology to go get it. He studied it and learned that we could study the mind and have someone audit us to find out what are our triggers for certain reactions. And eating is a reaction to a lot of us to try to cope with trauma or insecurities. So that is one way to help find out why they are habitual eating, because normally people eat when they're not hungry and they begin to gain weight. So try Dianetics, and that was a gift to us from the Ambulance of Farrakhan.
Yes, sir, it surely is. And thank you so very much for joining us today, Brother Charles. We truly appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And thank you all for joining us today and tuning into National Network View News. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News. This is Nyah Tsai with National Network View.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.